couple of weeks ago, I gave you one player that I would trade for every 2025 first round pick. Well, today I'm going to do the opposite. Those picks have gained value, especially since the NFL Combine, to the point where I think you can consider turning around and trading them away for other players. So here's a list of players that I would trade away each 2025 first round pick for. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment. Let's get into it. All right, so we're getting into the phase of rookie hype that happens every single year like clockwork, where basically every single day, these picks are going to start creeping up in value. They're moving up, on Keep Trade Cut, on Fantasy Calc. People are starting to become enamored with this rookie class. It really starts at the Combine and it continues on until the NFL Draft. People kind of envision what this class is going to look like. They imagine the NFL Draft, and it's always best case scenario. Every prospect is going to get drafted at the high end of their projected draft capital range. They're going to land on great teams where they're going to immediately step into these impactful roles. We always get to this point where the hype reaches kind of a fever pitch, and nobody can imagine, the class going wrong. They can't imagine their favorite prospect landing on a bad depth chart or with a bad quarterback or whatever. You think back to like the 2022 class a couple of years ago, the late firsts especially looked a lot less appealing actually after the NFL Draft. Isaiah Spiller completely flopped. David Bell fell to the third round of the draft. Rachaad White went in the third round, but he got drafted behind Leonard Fournette. James Cook went to Buffalo. He was kind of a surprise second round pick, but he was in what was looked at as a crowded backfield with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. There were a lot of these prospects that people were interested in that had, decent profiles or draft capital projections that just didn't really get the draft capital or didn't land in the situations that we would hope for. And that is something I think could happen again with the 2025 class. It's at least something we have to factor in when we are valuing picks, especially those later firsts. And we can't just imagine it's all going to be, sunshine and rainbows. So that's not to say that I am panicking on this class. Not at all. I have started to like the class more than I did initially. And I think this class does have more high quality running back prospects than 2022, but I don't think we just need to be holding on to these picks no matter what. I think a lot of times it does make sense to trade them away. Now, I do think some of these picks are maybe still a little bit undervalued, especially in the startup market. I think that there's a little bit of a psychological element where people don't love clicking the rookie picks in startup drafts because they don't get an actual player. And so it feels less satisfying in the moment because you're not actually getting a player. You're just getting another chance at a player later. So I think that there's a disconnect in the startup price for some of these rookie picks versus where they're ranked on Fantasy Calc, where I think that might actually be a little bit more accurate. But some of these picks, they might still be a little bit undervalued. They might continue to gain value at least up until the draft. So for this video, my goal isn't to find players that are consistently valued below these picks that I would be trying to trade for. I'm looking for more ambitious trade targets. Because really right now, if you're not getting a clear value win, you don't have to trade these picks. They are very insulated assets. They can't get injured. They can't get traded to a bad team. And for the most part, they are going to continue gaining value. So I'm going to be listing players where I don't think you can necessarily just go out in every league and make this trade one for one. But if you find the right manager who is looking to acquire these picks, I think you can get these deals done. So again, I'm aiming more on the ambitious side. I'm not just going for the low-hanging fruit here. So before you rush to the comment section to tell me I'm an idiot for suggesting that these players should be your targets because no one in your super smart dynasty league would make these deals, I hear you. I get it. But rookie fever is real. I see it every year. And the point of this video is how to actually exploit that rookie fever. So starting at the top of the draft, we have the 101. Everybody's got Ashton Jeanty penciled in there. I think he's going to go 101 in almost every single dynasty rookie draft. And he's been kind of a rocket ship lately, really rising up on sites like Fantasy Calc and Keep Trade Cut. And so I actually don't think that this trade is super unrealistic, but I would be looking to trade Ashton Jeanty or the 101 pick away for Brian Thomas. I have Brian Thomas in a tier with a couple of other wide receivers like Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb. I think Thomas is probably the most realistic target, but I would certainly take any of those guys for Jeanty. I think what you're getting there with Thomas after what he showed in his rookie year is a player with similar scoring upside that we already know is a hit in the NFL, and more importantly, is playing at a less volatile position than running back. He's going to have a longer prime. He's going to have more value insulation year to year. He is such a good wide receiver, and I think he is a good fit with Trevor Lawrence. I think Liam Cohn coming in is a really good thing for him. And you look at the rest of the Jaguars depth chart, it's Brenton Strange, De'Ami Brown, Gabe Davis. Even if they go out and make an investment in the draft in an early pass catcher, there is so much work there that Thomas could absorb. So I like him ahead of the 101. I've got him ranked ahead in my rankings, and I think that's a trade you can offer, potentially get done in a lot of leagues. Now, the 102 is a bit of a tricky evaluation. I think there's a larger gap in the market value of between 101 and 102 than we see in a typical class maybe. But you should see some of the players that this pick has been traded for over the past month. You go into the Dynasty Daddy trade database, you can see trades where this pick has been moved 1-for-1 for another player. I saw deals where the 102 was sent for Drake May, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Nico Collins, Saquon Barkley, and some of those maybe aren't really that realistic. Maybe they're very low percentage odds, but one I think you could get done is Drake London. It kind of feels like the hype for Amarian Hampton is hitting a bit of a high point right now, where people are really excited about him being a probable first round pick after his athletic testing. And I think he's really, really good. I think he's worthy of that selection. But if I can parlay that excitement into a wide receiver in Drake London, who is still only 23 years old, showed us last year that he's capable of elite production, and is just going to continue to be that alpha wide receiver in the Falcons offense, now led by Michael Penix, that is something that I want to do. Now with the 103, I do think this one's a little bit of a long shot, but I would be targeting Ladd McConkey in trades with this pick. I actually saw a tweet yesterday from a pretty big account that said if you can sell Ladd McConkey for the 102 or the 103 in rookie drafts, you should do it and laugh to the bank. And I just could not disagree more. Ladd McConkey, he might not look like your stereotypical high upside wide receiver archetype, but he showed us last year that his ceiling is plenty high. He is an elite target earner, which is really the main path to upside. When we talk about upside, there's really nothing we should care about more than the ability to earn targets at a high level. But he also showed us great yak ability. He's always open. You can see here his average separation score chart from fantasy points. He excels on pretty much every route when it comes to creating separation. And as a rookie, he finished 8th among all wide receivers in yards per route run, really 7th if you take out Christian Watson, who plays a part-time role. He finished above an 80 PFF receiving grade. He was the only wide receiver in the class other than Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas to do that. And that is an incredibly predictive mark when it comes to wide receiver talent and fantasy performance. And something that I think is maybe under-discussed, he has been a big winner so far in the offseason. The Chargers did not go out and add Devontae Adams. They did not add DK Metcalf. They did not add T. Higgins. So at this point, any major competition that could be added for Ladd McConkey is going to have to come through the draft. And I'm really not afraid of any of the wide receivers in this class coming in and disrupting what Ladd McConkey was doing last year. Honestly, anybody who's afraid of competition doesn't really understand how targets are distributed in the NFL. There are some unique cases like the 49ers a few years ago where you have so many elite weapons that everyone's target share gets squeezed. You can't have Debo and Ayuk and McCaffrey and Kittle all hitting their absolute ceiling at the same time. But for the most part, you look at a regular offense, the alpha is going to eat first. They're going to absorb as many targets as they're capable of, and then it's going to funnel down to the rest of the offense. So you look at last year's Chargers offense, you have Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, Semi Fehoko, Jalen Reagor, DJ Chark combining for 194 targets. So anybody that gets brought in, whether it was Devontae Adams or DK Metcalf or a rookie in this class, maybe it's somebody like Jaden Higgins, I don't know, whoever it is, they're going to be taking routes and targets from that group of receivers, those guys that were kind of sharing routes, sharing that outside wide receiver role throughout the season. That new wide receiver is not taking anything away from Ladd McConkey because he is going to be at the top of that pecking order. So I think he's shown more than enough to be viewed ahead of any wide receiver in this class, and he's already paired with a great quarterback. Now, if you want more specific trade advice or rookie draft advice for your league settings and your roster, you should consider picking up a Dynasty Team Breakdown. I can help you figure out if you should be contending or rebuilding while offering specific trade suggestions and tips for roster management based on bench size, number of starters, and scoring bonuses. Really just going through and trying to figure out if this was my dynasty team, what would I do to put it in the best position to succeed? So if you're interested in something like that, you should go down to the description. You'll find a link there that'll take you to a Google form where you can request a team breakdown today. And you can ask any specific questions about your team that you would like me to address in the breakdown. So I hope you'll check that out. Now let's get on to the 104. All right, with the 104 pick, I'm going to be targeting Breece Hall. I think that the Breece hate has gone a little bit too far this offseason. You know, he's an amazing college prospect. He balled out as a rookie prior to his ACL tear, comes off that injury, has a really impressive 17 points per game campaign in 2023 with 87 targets, and he scored like 30 points per game in the fantasy playoffs. Then in 2024, he has a down year in what is a completely dysfunctional offense run by Nathaniel Hackett until he got fired midseason. And it's like Breece Hall has the plague at this point. Now, I may not have had as many highlight reel plays in 2024, but I really struggle to think that Breece Hall is washed at the ripe old age of 23 years old. I don't think he just lost his athletic ability after he came off the ACL tear and looked totally fine and explosive. I don't think that he regressed or lost that athletic ability in 2024. I think it's more likely that the offense was stale and uninventive. But now you have Justin Fields coming in. That's immediately going to make the run game more efficient just due to his rushing ability. The defense is going to have to account for Fields as a rusher. That's going to open up more lanes for Breece Hall. And then you have Tanner Engstrand, the new OC for the Jets. He's coming over from Detroit. So I think he might know a thing or two about efficient run games. And then the last piece of this puzzle, I think, is Justin Fields having a pretty high check down rate across his career. Now, the overall volume is going to be lower, so I wouldn't necessarily bank on Hall getting up to, anywhere near 87 targets again. But I think you combine increased rushing efficiency with a bit of a bounce back for the offense as a whole. I think Breece Hall can be just fine. Again, I think he's an elite talent at the position. I would be taking Breece Hall over the RB3 in this class, or Cam Ward, or whoever else you'd be getting at the 104 pick. At the 105, my trade target is going to be JJ McCarthy. Now, I know I've criticized this exact phrase before, but if JJ McCarthy was a rookie in this class, a top 10 pick going to this loaded Vikings team with Kevin O'Connell as the head coach, I think he'd probably be the 102. And by all accounts, he's going to be ready for week 1 after not playing in his rookie season. So he's basically coming in like a rookie, never seen him play before. I don't frankly buy the Aaron Rodgers rumors. It doesn't make any sense to me that the Vikings would want to bring in a head case like that who frankly wouldn't want to run the KOC offense the way that it's meant to be run. And JJ McCarthy is 7 months younger than Cam Ward right now in a significantly better environment than we're likely to see Ward go into either with the Titans or the Browns or the Giants. So as far as I'm concerned, I would rather have McCarthy than Cam Ward. And I just drafted McCarthy in a startup at the 409 after the 104 pick was off the board. So I think this is very doable. And I think he continues to be one of the stronger buys in Superflex. I'm going to go with another quarterback here at the 106, and that's Dak Prescott. Seems like the dynasty community has gotten a little bit of the ick for Dak Prescott. His value has really taken a hit since his 2024 season was ended early with that hamstring injury. But he's just been a very productive fantasy quarterback throughout his career. Now, he doesn't run as much as he did early in his career, but neither do quarterbacks like Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield, and he's being valued well behind those players, despite being a similar age, a year and a half older than those guys. And this is clearly recency bias. He's coming off of a worse year than those two quarterbacks, but he has a much stronger track record throughout his career. Prior to 2024, Dak had scored 17 or more points per game in every single season of his career, dating back to 2016. And that includes 3 years above 20. 4 if you count the year that he only played in 5 games before he broke his ankle. So yeah, Dak Prescott at 31 years old, he's not a sexy name anymore, but I think he's a good bet for several more years of QB1 production. And I'm happy to swap the 106 for that if I have a need at quarterback. With the 107 pick, I want to target one of my favorite buys at the running back position, and that's Kenneth Walker. He's actually valued a little bit behind the 107 now on Fantasy Calc, although he's slightly ahead in startup drafts. So I think in some leagues you could even get a plus on top with the 107, maybe just a couple of thirds or a second, third round swap or something. But still, anything you could get on top would be great. I'm happy to make this trade straight up because Kenneth Walker is just good at football. He breaks big plays. He's a capable receiver. We saw early last season, I think, some of the ceiling potential for him, but just couldn't string it together for the whole year due to the groin injury, due to the offensive line struggles for the Seahawks. And I think the addition of Clint Kubiak is going to be pretty big for Walker. You're going to see a much more creative run game. I think you're going to see some bigger personnel packages used. That's going to help the efficiency. Then I also think in the passing game, you look at the usage that Alvin Kamara got as a receiver in New Orleans. I'm not going to say that Walker is as capable of a route runner as Kamara, but the Seahawks don't have an abundance of talent in the tight end room. They don't have a ton of wide receiver depth. Really, they don't have any. I think Walker's going to be pretty busy as a receiver as well. So I really like targeting him here for the 107. I think he could be in for a career best season. Okay, the rest of the players I'm going to talk about today are all wide receivers. And at the 108, I'm going to be targeting Chris Olave. Now, there's a lot of parallels, I think, between Olave and Garrett Wilson as far as how their careers have gone so far. They've both endured a lot of bad luck as far as quarterback play and offensive issues. For Olave, you throw in the concussions as well. It's just been a really unfortunate string of circumstances for both of these wide receivers, but Olave's been significantly more discounted. I think mostly due to the 2024 season being cut short due to the concussions, and I think some of those first quarter exits that he had last year really stuck with people, where he scored like 0 points in a game. But the truth about Olave is he's been very efficient per route in his career. He's never been below 2 yards per route run in a season. He earns targets at a high rate. I think he's just a very good wide receiver. Now, the Saints situation is admittedly not great, but I'm willing to bet on Olave's talent over the prospects that are likely going to be available at this spot. Now, with the 109 pick, I'm going to be targeting another wide receiver who I think the talent has been a little bit discounted due to the situation. In this case, not because of a bad offense, but because of a low volume offense. Like if you had to pick two metrics to pinpoint the effectiveness of a wide receiver, it would be targets per out run and yards per out run. It's asking when on the field, how often is this wide receiver to be targeted and how efficient are they on these targets? And Zay Flowers, he looks really good in these metrics. Just to make an extreme comparison, here's Zay Flowers versus Ja'Marr Chase in targets per out run and yards per out run last year. They're really close, very close together. Now, the big difference here, of course, is that Baltimore ranked 31st in pass attempts and Cincinnati was second. They threw 11 more passes per game than the Ravens. And I'm absolutely not suggesting that Zay Flowers and Ja'Marr Chase are similar talents. I'm not saying that. I don't think Flowers would maintain those exact numbers if he was on an offense that threw as much as the Bengals did. So I'm not trying to compare the two as equals, but I do think he's a really good wide receiver and he's 24 years old. And that gives him a pretty high floor in terms of value and his yearly production. But if the Ravens ever find themselves having to throw the ball more in 2025 or 2026, maybe because Henry loses some effectiveness or the defense is worse or whatever, Zay Flowers would be one of the main beneficiaries of that. And I think he's good enough to kind of rise to that challenge. So do I think he's going to finish as a wide receiver 1? No. But I think he's a good bet to finish as a wide receiver 2. I think high-end wide receiver 2 is in his range of outcomes. And again, there's just a level of safety here over the prospect you can get at the 109, where I'm comfortable making this swap. All right, at the 110, my trade target is going to be Jalen Waddle, who has had one of the biggest falls from grace in a single season that I can really remember. He had 3 straight years to start his career of 14 to 15 points per game. He had elite targets per out run and yards per out run numbers, especially in 2023. Now he's coming off a down season with Tua missing a lot of time, the Dolphins' offensive line completely falling apart, and people are just out on Jalen Waddle. Like, he used to be overvalued as the sort of heir apparent to Tyreek Hill, but now that Tyreek Hill looks like he's actually on his last legs, where like there's genuine concern that Tyreek Hill has kind of lost a step, and Jalen Waddle has never been cheaper. It's just really funny how the dynasty market operates at times like this. But I'm totally willing to buy into Waddle for the price of a late first, even if you have to throw in a little something. I think that's just good business. Because here's the thing. He's 26, barely 26. I don't think he just forgot how to play wide receiver. And I'd say a bounce back is in order for 2025. Yes, you have to hope that Tua can stay healthy. You have to hope that the line can be a little bit better. But at the end of the day, we have overwhelming evidence that Jalen Waddle is good. Tyreek Hill has never been closer to the end of his career than he is right now. And so that leaves a lot of scoring upside and a lot of value upside for Jalen Waddle. Moving on to the 111, I think George Pickens makes a lot of sense as a trade target here. The DK Metcalf trade has really had the market cooling on Pickens, and I think this is a pretty good buy low moment for him. He just turned 24 this month. He was pretty efficient last year, despite awful quarterback play from Fields and Russell Wilson. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite fantasy wide receiver just because his skill set isn't necessarily the type that you run an entire offense through, but he's proven to be really good at the game, and I think he has a few paths to success. It's not maybe super likely, but there's still some potential that he just gets traded this offseason, maybe during the draft, which could land him on a much better offense with a better quarterback. But we could also just see the passing volume come up in Pittsburgh with another viable weapon on the offense. And maybe most of DK's targets are being funneled away from guys like Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson. And Pickens is, mostly unaffected by this when you account for an increase in passing volume. Now, the obvious elephant in the room for Pittsburgh is the quarterback play. And admittedly, it doesn't look like it's going to be very good in 2025. Right now, their starting quarterback is Mason Rudolph. I don't know how likely it is that they bring in Rodgers or Russell Wilson for next year. Not that either of those would be particularly exciting. And if they go with like a Jackson Dart in the draft, that's probably not moving the needle in fantasy either. So admittedly, the quarterback's a big problem, but I think that's also a big part of why Pickens is so affordable in Dynasty right now. All right, the last pick we're going to talk about today is the 2025 112. And I'm going to go with one of my guys here, someone that's really become a staple of my analysis, a player I find myself constantly gravitating towards because the market just doesn't really respect his talent, and that's Josh Downs. We saw in 2024 that Josh Downs is good at the game. He was 5th in the NFL in targets per route run among all wide receivers that ran at least 200 routes. He was targeted on 30% of his routes, and he had 2.28 yards per route run, which was 19th in the league at wide receiver. That's pretty good when you're considering his quarterbacks were Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson to be that efficient. So the thing about Downs is right now, he's not really capable of wide receiver one production because he's mostly confined to the slot. He's running 70 to 75% of the routes, but he is still quite young. He doesn't turn 24 until August. He has a really high talent floor, as we've seen this past season. And I do still have hope that at some point in his career, he can earn a full route share. I think he's capable of playing on the outside. And maybe it just takes, Shane Steichen being fired or something for another coach to come in and see what Josh Downs can do on the outside. But as far as the quarterback's concerned, maybe you're thinking, another year with Richardson, why would I want to buy into Josh Downs? I suspect at some point this year, we're going to see Richardson get replaced by Daniel Jones, who, granted, is not a great actual quarterback. He's pretty terrible, but I think he's a better and more accurate passer than Anthony Richardson. And more importantly, I think his tendencies align a lot more with Josh Downs, where he's not going to be looking to run around and chuck it down the field. I think he's more likely to get the ball out quick to Downs, these lower ADOT throws, and kind of let him work after the catch. So I think in the back half of the year, you've got a good chance to have Daniel Jones on the field, which is going to be good for Josh Downs' fantasy value. And I think even more importantly, you're probably looking at a brand new quarterback for Downs in 2026. This might not feel like a super exciting swap for your 112 pick right now as you sit and imagine the best case scenario for the draft where every guy you like lands in a good spot, gets the draft capital you're hoping for. But I think there are a lot of ways that this draft plays out where you're sitting there at the 112 and you're kind of begging for a player that's as good as Josh Downs when all is said and done. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, thanks so much for watching this video and thank you for supporting the channel. If you do enjoy my Dynasty content and you want to catch future videos, rookie mock drafts, rookie rankings, things like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Really goes a long way. And if you want to go even further and support my content, consider joining as a YouTube member. That's going to give you access to weekly live streams, my top 200 Dynasty rankings, and private channels within the Pure Potential Discord where I am always chatting, always answering questions. You can find the join button down under this video or a link in the description to get set up with a YouTube membership today. Either way, I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video, and hopefully I'll see you then.